Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Blue Courage webinar, Anchoring to Purpose in Uncertain Moments. We're fortunate enough to have all of our Blue Courage Master Trainers here with us today. We have Michael Neela, Dan Schmer, David Dubois, Howard Powers, and Jack Hart. And I will turn it over to Jack to get us started.
Becky, thank you so much for getting this inspired and amazing cast of characters together into one room here on a Friday morning here on the left coast and Friday afternoon for everyone else. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Blue Courage Friday webinar. And thanks also to Jocelyn, also from our back of house, for all the hard work done to make sure that we could all be here this morning. Just wanted to take a moment to pause and reflect on this Peace Officers Memorial Day 2020 for so many members of our profession who have paid the ultimate price for preserving freedom, upholding democracy, manifesting justice, protecting life, and keeping the peace. Thank you all very much. So welcome to this Anchoring to Purpose in Uncertain Moments webinar. I'd also like to welcome this amazing group of Blue Courage Master Trainers to the panel today, including Blue Courage Creator and Aurora Police Department Emeritus Member Michael Neela, National Instructor and Michigan State Police Emeritus Member Howard Powers, National Instructor and Michigan and Kansas City Police Emeritus Member Dan Schmer, National Instructor and Sheriff of Stratford County, New Hampshire, David Dubois. And I also wanted to thank and introduce Chisa Marie Miller, our Inclusive Leadership Master Trainer, for being on the call and for inviting others to join us today. Hello, Chisa.
Hello. We invited a few of our corporate clients to this webinar. So we've got Aerotech, T. Rowe Price, San Francisco Adult Probation as well. So we're happy to join you.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us. You know, so many of these principles that we discuss in Blue Courage certainly apply to policing, but I think they apply to all of us on the very human, personal, and professional level. So thank you all for joining us today. So why are we here? Great question, you know, especially on this auspicious day of May 15th for our policing profession. You might asking yourself why we need to be reminded of purpose. And so much of our reminders in our policing profession and when our nobility is at our best comes when we are at funerals. But in spite of these ultimate prices that are paid, we who are survivors and are in this profession and intend to be in it for a long time certainly need to anchor ourselves to something very deep and to be reminded of our commitment. And so I'm really struck by this quote by Peggy Noonan, who is a White House reporter who wrote a book called Patriotic Grace, What It Is and Why We Need It Now. And she said this quote, she said, "The mood of the moment, it is marked in part by a sense that our great institutions are faltering, that they've forgotten the mission, that the old America in which we were raised is receding, and that something new and quite unknown is taking its place, that our leaders have gone astray." And interestingly enough, she wrote that on election night 2008. Does this quote apply in 2020? Probably even more so. And so her question that she raises is there something new and unknown taking its place? Or is it simply that we need to fall back on timeless principles of leadership and personal effectiveness and personal development in order for us to lean into this moment and to meet the challenges that we find in front of us? And so in order to sort of lay a roadmap to the future, I always like reflecting on the past. And in policing, at least, our profession has been disrupted significantly over the past few years, long before coronavirus even started. And we were in this new revolution in policing on procedural justice, police legitimacy, and de-escalation. But this wasn't the first revolution in policing, you know, almost 25, 30 years ago, policing was going through the community policing revolution. And I always like Michael telling the story of his opportunity of teaching this brand new concept called community policing, which actually wasn't very brand new, to a room full of police officers from the Minneapolis, Minnesota Police Department. And there he reflects on being in this beautiful downtown auditorium in Minneapolis, ready to filled with the passion and excitement for policing that he has, and was met by the training sergeant who had a stack of sign-in sheets for the class about 3 feet thick and told him, you need to have them sign in before the class, before every break, before lunch, after lunch, and at the end of the day. Well, if that was surprising, I guess Michael was even more surprised by when the students walked into class. Now, we know, at least in policing, that in-service training for veteran officers is usually met by the students sitting as far away from the instructor as possible, but not this class. Students sat in the second row because they brought large king-size pillows with them and immediately went to sleep right at the beginning of class and wanted Michael, the instructor, to see it. Others were reading the paper. Others were having loud, long cell phone conversations in the middle of class. And do you remember what cell phones looked like in the mid-90s? They were like, 2 hands, hey, how's it going? I mean, and this was going on in spite of Michael's best efforts. And after about 90 minutes of this, Michael said, all right, everybody, I just have one question for you. What are you all so angry about? And for 90 minutes, no joke, Michael wrote down on pieces of classroom butcher paper all the names and groups of people that made the cops' lives miserable and made them angry. Every police chief going back 100 years, every mayor whose name that they could remember, the church groups who brought in the refugees from out of town that they now had to police. We hate them. They hated the media. They hated instructors from out of town. Michael even made the list, and on the list grew. And finally, when the room got quiet, Michael said, are you guys done? And they said, no, give us 10 more minutes and we'll come up with more names. And Michael said, I bet you could, but I just have one observation. Out of all the names and groups of people that make your lives miserable as police officers, there's one group of people that you left off of that list. And who was it? Who was it that they left off the list? And you probably thought of the word themselves. And just as soon as they said it, they said, yeah, actually, we hate ourselves too. And Michael said, how could you possibly lug around all this junk, for 10, 20, or 30 years as a police officer and remotely do a good job? It's impossible. And at that moment, Michael asked them to close their eyes, and he got them to think back about what policing was about. At that moment, he challenged them to remember that the badge that's on their chest, or the badge that's in the badge case in their pocket because they were a detective, and to think back on that day that they were sworn into what they believed was a noble profession. That day that they were joining one police department out of 18,000, that they were one cop out of 800,000, upholding and defending freedom and democracy for 323 million Americans, 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. The concept of the police had never existed, but they're following in the lines of what Plato called the guardians. And that, if the cobblers and the masons fail to do their jobs, it doesn't matter. But if the guardians fail, the republic will crumble. And they were the guardians every single day, being the street level arbiters of justice 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then he told them, open your eyes, look around the room, and how did you end up here? And for some of them, it was a very short trip. People with very little time in the profession were manifesting the same pain and cynicism and anger and disillusionment that the veterans had had in the room. And as he dismissed them for lunch to regroup, a sergeant jumped up in the front row, turned around and yelled, you know what's wrong in this police department? Nobody talks to us like that. Nobody reminds us how people are counting on us to get it right. Nobody reminds us why we join this profession, and even more importantly, why we stay every single day. Nobody talks to us like that. And when Michael heard those words, he was inspired and thought to himself, gee, when's the last time I talked to my cops like that? And even as I'm sitting here today in 2020, I'm thinking to myself, when is the last time I talked to my cops in that way? And on that day, it started Michael on this purpose journey to writing the Nobility of Policing book. And now, 20 years into his retirement from Aurora Police Department, still going strong and speaking about purpose. So Michael, good morning. I always like trying to tell your stories. You're a much better storyteller than I am, but that story always hits me at just the right time to remind us of what we came into this profession to do, and that we need to believe in order to have hope. So one of the quotes that you tell in the Blue Courage class, which I think is so powerful and really keys into not only the Minneapolis experience, but to our struggle for purpose today, is from Richard Livingston, who said, one is apt to think of moral failure as due to a weakness of character. More often, it is due to an inadequate ideal. And so you'd think, well, gee, look at those failures in the room of people sleeping in this class, but really maybe it was that inadequate ideal. So could you talk briefly about what an adequate ideal looks like, and how do we use purpose to get ourselves out of the fog?
Yeah, nice challenge. Thank you for that. And by the way, I do love hearing other people tell my stories, because I think you tell them better than I do. But, let's start first with the premise that we as human beings are purpose-driven human beings. We've known from the beginning of time that we are all driven by purpose, and to do something, and to give life meaning, and to make a contribution. And when that falters, when we lose sight of what that mission is, or we've never discovered it, our sense of purpose, then I kind of describe it as we're all like sitting in the bleachers of life and watching our life go by, without really any direct intent to make some type of a contribution and dent in this universe. So to me, one of the most powerful things we can ever talk about, be it in leadership or in our law enforcement training or any mission that we're in right now, is purpose. I'm actually in awe when I see many of the healthcare workers who have gone to help other states and other hospitals than their own. And when they're asked why are they doing it, why are they putting themselves at risk, they all say this is the moment we were born for. This is what we trained for. This is what we've spent our lifetime dedicating ourselves to, this moment. So that's purpose. That's mission. So for me, it is literally everything. And we know that in policing, particularly, but not only policing, many of our professions suffer from apathy and cynicism. And we often say in Blue Courage that the opposite of courage, we would tend to think, is cowardice or fear, when Brene Brown teaches us the opposite of cowardice of courage is actually apathy and indifference. Because courage is about risk taking, and why would any of us take a risk about anything that we don't care about? So fundamental to all human performance, everything that we do, is what are we living our life for? Why did we wake up this morning? Why do we put the uniform on? Why do we get in our car and go to work? So to me, it's all about driven by purpose.
And we know that Simon Sinek has been talking a lot in his Infinite Game books about that the infinite game is not about winning or losing, but it's about determining whether we're ahead or behind. So this idea of like a compelling scoreboard of knowing where you're at any given moment is really important. Would you mind telling the Florence Chadwick story and talk briefly about how this lack of clarity of vision and purpose could impact our performance and potential for growth?
Yeah, one of the, I used to teach 7 Habits, and I see people who are on here that have attended 7 Habits with me. But when we teach Habit 2, which is begin with the end in mind, we always start with a couple of stories. The first is about Alice in Wonderland, and the story where she gets to a fork in the road and is unsure which path to take. And so she asks the Cheshire Cat up in the tree, hey, which path should I take? And the cat says, well, where are you going? And she says, I really don't know. And the cat says, well, then it doesn't really matter which path you take, does it? But in the real story of our lives, as far as we know, we get one shot at it. So it does matter which paths we take. It does matter the choices and decisions we make. And so another story that we tell in 7 Habits that I just absolutely love is the story of Florence Chadwick, who was a competitive swimmer, raised in San Diego, ironically, by a San Diego police officer. And she was the first female to swim the English Channel both ways. So very, very famous and competitive swimmer. And the story is told of her doing a competitive swim across to Catalina Island, which is about 26 miles length of a marathon. And as the swimmers always, they have their the rescue boat next to each of the swimmers with their coaches, maybe some friends, medical people, in case the swimmer gets in trouble, because they're swimming for hours and hours and hours. And she had been swimming for a couple of hours when she yelled up to her coach, hey, I don't have it today. I'm not competitive. Get me out of the water. It's just not my day. Well, his job is to, of course, cheer her on. So he tells her, hey, your stroke looks great. You're in the lead. Lead swimmers, keep on going. You're doing fine. So she swims for a few more hours and finally yells up to him very exasperatedly, okay, this time I'm done. I don't care what you say. Pull me out of the water. The coach pulls her out of the water. And the last probably 30 minutes, she had been swimming in the fog. she couldn't see where she'd been, and she couldn't see where she was going. And so when they hit the throttle on the boat, they traveled a few hundred yards. She sees the fog clears, and she sees that she got out of the water less than several hundred yards from her destination from shore. And what she said was so profound. She said, if I'd only been able to see where I was, I would have been able to finish. So I love the power of the message from that, because what it says is hard work doesn't wear us out. We are amazingly hardwired to struggle as human beings. We're amazingly hardwired to overcome resistance. It's not the hard work that wears us out. It's operating in the fog, not having clarity, not getting clarity from our leaders, not being clear about why we do this work for us. In one of our previous webinars, we talked about the optimist and the pessimist and the realist. And I kind of made the observation that in policing, the people who seem to really develop difficult attitudes around this profession are both the optimist and the pessimist. It's the realist who understands, what is this job, what is it about, has absolute clarity on the demands of this work and why we do it, that seem to be able to navigate this career for 20, 25, or 30 years and still remain mentally and physically healthy.
Well, we're grateful that you picked up the journey of purpose and to really do the hard work to study from the greats and reading as much as you have in order to help the rest of us get onto this journey as well. And from all of those writings came the Nobility of Policing book, and we're so grateful for that. It's so simple unless we're reminded of those principles. And so could you just take a moment and define what purpose is then, so that we can figure out why a connection to it actually turns into motivation?
Yeah, and just a quick word about the nobility of policing, or purpose in policing. I recently spoke at a Chicago Police Department summit on health and wellness and suicide prevention and resilience. And of course, they had national speakers, experts from all over the world. But the one common message every single one of them said, whether they were therapists or psychologists or peer group supporters, whatever it might be, every single one of them said purpose is the preventative measure for depression and starting to get down that path. That when we lose our way with our mission, then it becomes easy to stray, as you said with the quote earlier about, it's really the weakening of an ideal that causes people to act in ways that are inappropriate. So mission has to be kept, front and center. And when we talk about a definition of purpose, if you can put the slide up, Josh, please. To me, it's defined as a yearning, and I love that word yearning. I mean, it's an aching in your soul when you get away from it. When you have a deep defined why or purpose, as Simon Sinek says, you get butterflies in your gut. You get goosebumps when you think about the work that you do. So it is a deep yearning that comes from inside of us to do what it is that we do, and always, always, always in the service of a cause larger than self, something that serves, humanity as a whole, something that perhaps eases some type of pain that is out there in the larger society, as we set out to do with Blue Courage. So I love that word, yearning. If you can hit it, Joss. So it's really, as Simon Sinek talks about, it's working with the knowledge of why we do the things, and a critical piece of this is how it contributes to something better. I think when our police officers, or any of us, any people in the healthcare business, when they begin to get apathetic, it's because they no longer know how what they're doing contributes to something better. But when we can focus on that we've touched a life, made it a little bit better today because of what we've done, then it brings to life why we do what we do.
And we bring into existence so many great leadership experts, modern leadership experts, including Daniel Pink and Simon Sinek and so many others that are talking about purpose. But these folks certainly aren't the first to talk about purpose. We speak a lot about Viktor Frankl, and I just wanted to show a quick video, just a couple minutes long, actually hearing from him speak and really questioning whether purpose and motivation really is something that's a driving factor over economics. We're in this economic crossroads here in 2020, but is it still worth talking about purpose? And then after the video, Dan, I especially want to hear you talk about esteeming others. And as Viktor Frankl speaks about Goethe's quote and how we should be, respecting and challenging others to be at their very best. So take a look at this video of Viktor Frankl.
They wish to make a lot of money. In Europe, every American student, even more every American adult, is regarded as someone who is just out to make a lot of money. Really, 16% of these students regarded their main goal and concern in life to make a lot of money. I'm quoting literally, make a lot of money. And you know what the top class, the top category, we say category, what do you say? Category was among, excuse me, but I know I am speaking a marvelous accent without the slightest English. Now, you know what the top category was? 78% of these American youngsters were concerned, as they expressed it themselves, with finding a meaning and purpose in their lives. So this is a realistic view on man. And you know, you won't believe it, gray hair, my age, I started taking flying lessons recently. Do you know what my flying instructor told me? If you are starting here, wish to get here, say east, heading for this, and you have a crosswind, you will drift and you will land here. So you have to do what we pilots call crabbing, he told me, C-R-A-B, crabbing. You have to head for north of this airfield, and you have to fly that way, you see, as if you headed in this direction. If you are heading here above this airfield, then you will actually land here. But if you head for here, you are landing here. This holds also for man, I would say. If we take man as he really is, we make him worse. But if we overestimate him, it's premature, your applause, you will soon know why. If we seem to be idealists and are overestimating, overrating man, and looking at him that high, here above, you know what happens? We promote him to what he really can be. So we have to be idealists in a way, because then we'll wind up as the real realists. And you know who has said this? If we take man as he is, we make him worse. But if we take man as he should be, we make him capable of becoming what he can be. This was not my flight instructor, this was not me, this was Goethe. He said this verbally. And now you will understand why I, in one of my writings, once said, this is the most apt maxim and motto for any psychotherapeutic activity. So if you don't recognize a young man's will to meaning, man's search for meaning, you make him worse, you make him dull, you make him frustrated, you still add and contribute to his frustration. While if you presuppose in this man, even in this so-called criminal or juvenile delinquent or drug abuse and so forth, there must be a what we call spark, a spark of search for meaning. Let's recognize this, let's presuppose it, and then you will elicit it from him, and you will make him become what he in principle is capable of becoming.
Oh, so much there to unpack, but Dan, I turn to you. What an amazing quote that is about esteeming other people and believing in others. And this applies to yourself. I love how he says that's an apt maxim for psychotherapeutic activity, but it's really a maxim for leadership, regardless of profession. Leadership about believing in others, and they might just actually hit where we would like them to go. How does this resonate with you? I think you're on mute.
There we go. I think it's fascinating and it's very interesting because, in Blue Courage, we use the term way of being, and Blue Courage is a way of being. And, it's so much bigger than treating somebody a certain way. It's actually how we are with people. And I think that's what Viktor Frankl was saying is see people as human and be in the moment with them as human beings. And we make them better than they are. And instead of objectifying them and turning them into objects, let's see them as human beings. And when we talk about leadership, I love what Simon Sinek says. It's not about it being in charge. It's about taking care of the people in your charge. And in order to do that, we have to see them as human beings. And then we make them better. And you know what? We make ourselves better too.
Wow. And also seeing ourselves as human beings with all the emotions and as we're dealing with this crisis day to day, I'm always reminded, hey, I'm a human being too. I could be feeling a whole range of emotions based upon what's going on. And you know what? That's okay. As long as we can anchor ourselves to this purpose. And Sheriff Du Bois, I know you're on the call as well. I wanted to check in with you. You're as an elected sheriff in a department, what is the fog today? What is the fog that you've seen either in yourself or in the people that you work with or for, or the community you serve? What's the fog? Florence Chadwick, of course, had the real fog. Being in San Francisco, I can talk about the fog. But what do you see as the fog that gets us in between seeing the humanity in others?
Yeah, it's a great analogy, the whole Chadwick story. And you think about it today on Law Enforcement Memorial Day, you got to ask yourself, is the sacrifice worth the purpose? And hundreds of thousands of law enforcement officers are going to make the decision that it is. So this fog that you think the purpose is so strong, how can something as small as fog get in the way? Well, in our world, the fog today where I'm working is things like, it's uncertainty. It's the high emotion of fear in the hearts of a law enforcement officer, with conflicting standards and conflicting priorities changing constantly in this COVID-19 environment. We're being forced to grow and learn new things at a time when many of us are struggling for motivation because our brains are just in an overload of constant challenge. So it's so important to put some intentional thought process and attention on this concept of purpose for the people we lead, but in many ways, more importantly, particularly for those of us who are in leadership positions, to reflect on the noble cause of our profession. Because if we think about it, that noble cause has always been the pathway to the shore, to use the Chadwick analogy again. Yeah, I listened to the opening about Minneapolis PD. That's really what Michael did for those officers. Just showed them the nobility of our profession. Was the gentle nudge that they needed to get through their fog and get to the shore. That's the way we're able to move in our profession through a time of great change and not forget and still remain who we truly are as a law enforcement professional or as a profession as a whole. It's an awesome analogy.
Awesome. Yeah. Personally and professionally. And it really takes a look at heart set and the things that we talk about in heart set are so difficult to put words to. That's always the challenge of it. It's like, how do you measure heart and vulnerability and courage, and all those things that we hold, and purpose? How do you measure that and quantify it? And so often, as Michael has taught us with the inspiration to mastery, is that we have to look to heart set. And so I wanted to come next to the why statements and just to kind of link in that, we have partnered with the Simon Sinek team. We have a course offering called Find Your Why, which is part of the, Simon Sinek's writings on Start With Why, and really being able to get to the ability of putting down into words the sense of feeling. And so, Jocelyn, maybe you could get to the why statements slide and just maybe accelerate forward just for a moment. And that we were able to do that as an organization with the Blue Courage Golden Circle, but really it's the personal ones in these why statements. And maybe you could go to the next slide, Joss. That one, yeah. I mean, it's so look at all the people that are on this call, and I can't tell you how difficult it was to really be able to put into concrete words what we are able to bring to the world, and what we are when we are at our best. Not only that, what our unique contribution is as human beings, but also what we hope to see in the world. And you can see these sentences here up on the screen, and maybe they don't resonate with you, or you'd say, I know Jack Hart, I don't know about that illuminating thing, but it resonates with us, and we were able to do that hard work of putting the heart set into mindset in such an organized way. So big shout out to Simon Sinek and his team for not only coming up with a way to put the words to feelings, but by trusting us in the Blue Courage team to really kind of bring this process to life, not only for our law enforcement agencies, but also for our private partners as well that I know are on this call, and that Chisa has brought with her as well. And so the next slide, in these difficult times, we always look for an inspiring quote or something that resonates with us to encapsulate what purpose is. And we see this quote from Virgil, that no day shall erase you from the memory of time. And we know that this is up on the wall at the World Trade Center site. And so, Howard, how important is anchoring to purpose related to forging and shaping our legacy?
Thank you, Jack, for that. I appreciate being on today. This concept, again, of purpose and meaning and understanding our why is so powerful, because when we look at our lives, and again, as I close out, probably the last third of my life, I look to what is important, what contribution have I made in this world, in my small circle, whether it be my family, whether it be my organizations that I'm connected with, whether it be my community. And so how do we become the best version of ourselves? And when we anchor that in purpose, when we anchor that in meaning, it takes us to another level. And so when we look to, again, how is it that we live our lives? And again, just be, and to do it consistently, to be the best persons that we can be. When we anchor it in purpose and meaning, it takes us to another level.
Wow, thank you, Howard. So, Michael, I'll ask you to close us out, because, if no day will erase us from the memory of time, and we know how important purpose is to not only anchoring us, but to drive this motivation of yearning to aspire to service to something greater than ourselves. When should we get on this journey, Michael? And is there a fierce urgency of now?
We want to close with a video that is very powerful around this concept that Martin Luther King introduced to us about the fierce urgency of now. As Howard said, he's in probably the last third of his life as well as I am, and when you get to this state, you begin to realize that we don't have all the time in the world to do everything that we want to do. Time doesn't stand still, and so I think all of us have to keep our mission, our purpose, our contribution in front of us, anchor it, be anchored to it, so that it drives what we do every single day. And also remember that we're living in times that require us to act, and to act intentionally, and to do it right now. The fierce urgency of now. I always love the phrase, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? If not here, then where? So enjoy as we close this session out with the fierce urgency of now.
We are now faced with the fact, my friends, that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, that is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. The tide in the affairs of men does not remain at flooded ebbs. We may cry out desperately for time to pause in her passage. Time is adamant to every plea and rushes on. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, too late.
Make no mistake about it, time is running out. That's why we all need to be in a hurry, to face our fears, develop courage, share our bravest work, commit to excellence, get in shape, get out of debt, set high maintenance relationships, eliminate excuses, connect on a deeper level, dare mighty things, be generous, forgive others, love intensely, be in a hurry to pursue our goals, make our dreams come true, and to make our mark on the world.
Michael, Howard, Dan, David, Chisa, thank you so much for today. Becky, over to you.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you so much to all of our master trainers for sharing your wisdom with us today, and for Jack for guiding us through another amazing session. We want to remind everyone that this will be posted on YouTube. The recording also will be posted on the Blue Courage Facebook page. Please feel free to leave any comments, ask any questions. You can also email us at info@bluecourage.com with any questions that you have, and we'll have one of our master trainers get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you again all so much for being here today, and have a great weekend.
Thank you all.